thought of that. We were too happy.
What's now O'Galley Causeway on the beach side was very heavily covered with trees. It was almost like going through a tunnel, as I recall. They took all those down when they four-landed. And then you went on the rickety wooden bridge that had and about every other week there was a car went over that. People just didn't realize that you had to make those 90-degree turns. And they were just narrow little turns because there were only 2 lanes across there.
We'd run across the street and we'd enjoy the beach and enjoy the pier and so forth. And then we'd come back, and by the time we got across the street, we were covered with mosquitoes, just absolutely black. We'd take a shower before we went into the trailer, and as soon as we got in the trailer, we stayed there the rest of the day because we could not go out without getting eaten alive.
There were a lot of mosquitoes.
Very bad, very, very bad, extremely bad. Not only that, there were no-see-ums. These things would come through the screen. They were so small you couldn't see them. We used to call them no-see-ums, and they were really horrible. But we had some kind of a Florida concoction they mixed up. It smelled terrible. And you paint the screens with it, but it made it so bad you could hardly breathe in the house. It smelled so bad. But it kept them out. After a while, you know, we turned into a Florida cracker like everybody else and got used to it.
They said, you don't want to be here. Don't go out after night, after dark. The mosquitoes are like dive bombers. They'll carry you away.
These bi-wing county-operated sprayers, I think 3 or 4 of those was going all the time. I mean, all during the day. And then the Air Force had a couple of C-47s spraying. I mean, it was really a show there for a while.
Our bedroom windows were open because our homes weren't air conditioned. And I heard this sound outside our bedroom window, and you know, there wasn't anything out there. So if we ever heard anything weird, we, you know, wondered about it. So I think we tried to remember last night. We think we ran and got our dad to see what this noise was. Well, what this noise was a horse outside of our bedroom.
Yeah. When we come here, there's one wild horse. Percy Hitchcock's daughter fed it every afternoon.
Yeah. I only know about one horse, and the way we found out that they had this horse is Billy McKibben rode up to our house on this horse, bareback, and I'd never been on a horse before in my life, but he convinced me to go for a ride with him.
We had a couple of hoot owls would sit up there on the top of that antenna and wait at night for the smaller animals to come and have a drink at the well. And they'd come in and swoop down and pick them off every now and then. We had this cat. They got him mixed up with a rabbit or something, and so they come down. One of them came down after him, and next morning, feathers all over the place down there. The cat took care of him.
We had no telephone, no water, but we had wells and deep wells. To make a phone call, we'd have to always go to get a Coca-Cola. We went to O'Galley Causeway. There's a little type 7-Eleven on the causeway, and to get gas, we had to go all the way to Atlantic to buy gas and all.
Well, first long time we didn't have no telephone, we had electricity. But they had a telephone up with a Radio Shack set on a light pole. Had a little box and put a key in and turn it and got your phone out. Made your phone calls.
And then for mailing, well, you went up to South Patrick Shores Mini Mall, was called then, at the corner of Ocean Boulevard. And that's where the Amherst station was, Amherst Post Office.
We had no shopping, and we thought we'd never get it in all. And for years, like Christmas, if you want to do any big-time shopping, everybody went to Orlando.
Went to Orlando to shop at Colonial Plaza.
We had to go to Orlando to Sears. And it was like going to Orlando in those days was like a big trip.
Atlantic Plaza was not the first grocery store. Up where Gaskins is, or was, Gaskins, it's the little shopping center just south of Patrick.
And when we got a grocery store, I thought that was the greatest thing when we got a supermarket over here. And we didn't have to go to Melbourne to get the groceries.
Grandma, who built your house?
Oh, Percy Hitchcock and his brothers, Shine and Hug, and some of the cousins that came, and they built it in 1958. and I have no intention of leaving.
We was general contractors in Miami, and I went to Titusville to see about taking an examination for a contractor's license. And they informed me, to my very disappointment, that in this county there was no such a thing as examination. If you had $5, that anybody could be a builder. There was no zoning whatsoever and no inspection on the building whatsoever. The only inspection was on just a septic tank. So a group of us got to talking and discussing it, and decided to form a city. It was not my idea to form a city. It was my idea to agree with them that that was very important.
These guys, they wanted to form a city, and the old codgers like myself, we didn't care less. We lived out in the woods. I was looking for a cheap place to live. See, I didn't get involved really in it too much. All I know is there was two camps. The Michigan Beach camp was the leaders. They were the ones that's pushing the idea of incorporating. That was Percy and all his buddies from North Carolina primarily. And the rest of them was just hangers on. That, you know, the O'Galley Shores people, there wasn't enough down there. There was only about 4 or 5 families in that whole subdivision at that time.
Canova of Canova Beach, he was a government surveyor, and he come to find out that somebody heard he was going to build a trailer park where the Zixton bowling alley is now. And he said, over my dead body, nobody's going to build put a trailer park on this beach here, because it's too nice. A couple of nights later, and he said, let's form a town. Why he was interested in town, I don't know, because he was no part of it. I mean, down at Canova Beach, Canova. And he said, we'll form a town. And Percy said, we don't know nothing about that. He said, all we got to do is get a lawyer and draw up the regular papers and everything and send it to Tallahassee. And they'll approve it or disapprove it and all. And he come up and said, we got to have a mayor on it and a couple city councilmen. And naturally, he said, Percy, you'll have to be mayor. I said, I know nothing about it. He said, you don't have to know nothing about it. He said, namesake.
I was nominated to be mayor, and I refused to take it for 3 days. I cried and went on. I didn't want no part of that. I was accused of them having a secret meeting because they nominated me in second and moved nominations to be chosen by 2 seconds. We chose 5 councilmen, and most of them worked up at the Cape. We had a contest to choose the name of a city, and she's the one suggested Satellite Beach. Evelyn Price, I believe her name was.
To dedicate the city, we had all of the base commanders down, their band, made a big to-do out. We're going to have a picnic, whole works and all. Well, we planned this about 5 months in advance. So Shine and Jimmy Call and I, we decided, well, we're at the Space Center. Let's build something to put up in orbit. Our furnace man, he said, I'll furnish all the metal for a 20-foot spear, which you can call a satellite or whatever you want to. We got it to where it would turn, and we put a picture window in it, and said, we got to have a man in space and all. I want to see a doll or something of Zorro. It was his cowboy hat and all, and we put Zorro in it. Well, to make it like the Space Center, we sent our wives all over the county, because we had no stores or anything here and all over the county, and we bought every bit of talcum powder there was in Brevard County. We covered our satellite up and had a hole dug under it with a little bit of dynamite and all of the talcum powder we could get, so nobody would see it when we raised it up and all. So we had a tractor hooked up to it. We had about a 30-foot television tower that it was on. We set the powder off, and boy, it smelled good there because it covered everybody up. And while at that, we pulled the satellite up, and thank God it turned, and Zorro's still going around, and
They raised the satellite, and it was on a tower thing, and they had me climb up this tower as high as I would go, and then they took photographs. Well, I do know that I was petrified climbing this thing, but I was brave enough to do it, and they probably said, "Oh, your picture will be in the paper," and that's what made me do it. I don't know.
So we were gone for 14 months while a lot of things happened in our city. And when we got back, we were surprised to find that the place had been organized and it was now a city, and nobody had asked us, and we didn't see how this could possibly be because we were the first ones here, we thought. The first thing we did when we got back, somebody had said, go down to that city meeting, there's somebody, Percy Hedgecock just got to be mayor, and you better go down and see.
I think the first thing that we did that helped the city more than anybody will ever know, there was a big sign where the Satellite Lane bowling alley is that said, it was about 8 feet by 48 feet, and said to be elected a trailer court for 500 trailers. So that is why we started the city not to have trailers. So I called a meeting, was called an emergency meeting, which was provided in the charter. And the only place we had to meet is one of the councilman's houses, Wally White on the ocean.
So we went to an early city meeting, which was at Wiley White's house, down on the beach, one of the early houses. And Percy read a paper, and his hands were shaking, and apparently he was not used to public speaking, and we thought, is this going to be our mayor? But it turned out that he was a very fine, wonderful guy.
We voted unanimously not to ever allow a trailer court in our city. Well, when the city was first incorporated, we had built about 10, and I would say there was about 15 more houses, and a trailer court in the south end of our city, which was a disgrace.
Where the Sun on the Beach restaurant sat now, there was about 50 old house trailers sitting there, all this junk together. They used them for fishing getaways. So when they come over here fishing on the beach.
And there was about 30 people lived in here. So we passed the state health department code, and that covered trailer courts. And I know I had our building inspector to inspect it by the code, and they got 15 points. It was that bad. We give them 60 days to get it straightened up, which was impossible to straighten up. It was that bad without we doing it over. And the state gave them just 30 days.
They put out things in the paper and everything, called everybody they could get a hold of it, had a name that they knew owned one of them, asked them to move them. If they didn't, we had them moved or burn them up.
This was one of those deals where the politicians really did some stinking things. But in the long run, it probably worked out for the best.
I've never dreamed of being in politics and never played a part in politics prior to that time.
The conflicts that went on between Gleason and Hedgecock.
Miracle Mile. And that was a designation for a tract of land. I don't know how many acres it was.
600 of it owned by Lansing Gleason, who objected to it being in a city because we would not zone his property industrial.
The owner at that time wanted to make it a kind of an industrial park. And Percy wanted it to be residential, as it would abut other residential areas. You know, there was a huge fight.
So he took us to court, and we appealed it, but we lost, and it was taken out of the city. And less than a month later, he put it in the city of Indian Harbor Beach, who granted him industrial zoning. Less than 4 months after the city was incorporated, we built a civic center, which is about 2,100 square feet built, and give it to the city free of charge. We raised funds through various donations and raffles, and everybody pitched in. People would get mad if you didn't ask them to help.
They left the interior all open except for bathrooms.
Now that was now the first house now.
It was like a house.
All of us built that. The whole family, the whole crew built the first one, which was a house.
That's where we had our various meetings, and clubs are there, and receptions and so on. That had originally been, it looked like a 3-bedroom home.
Us 4 brothers and Jimmy Caldwell donated to the city for a city hall.
The next one was the city hall. I built that, and then Jimmy. I was slow at that time. Percy asked me to do it.
Added on to that, a new city hall and fire station right behind City Hall, the old City Hall, and turned our house, it was all tied in for the police department. This time we had a couple of policemen. The first slab we had was a little tennis court. We were going to have a little tennis court there.
We poured that tennis court one morning at 3 o'clock. We all had to work that day, and so we got concrete early, poured that big tennis court, which was never used back then.
We would put tents up over the tennis court, and we would have chicken fries, fish fries.
It was like when we would have Founders Day. You know, it was never some big planned party at some place. It was like, at first it was just like a picnic lunch, you know, where everybody would bring a dish, you know, a covered dish type thing. And we'd usually have, you know, ball games or something all day long. You know, just something where everybody would have something to do, to be entertained all day long.
It was used right on the first few weeks, but after that, people just did, I guess it's too hot for them. They just sat there, and after a while, we built a building around it.
Which is recreation building is on it now.
Lewis Olson, he was one of our landowners, and he was worth plenty. But he was kind to Percy and donated the land. That's why it's called Olson Field over here. And some of the property that's where the police department now is.
So I was the one who cleared the first ball diamond here at the police department, that little ball diamond. I wore out a tractor clearing it. None but Palmetto saw it was.
They had a vision, and the Hitchcocks and all of them, my family, they had a vision about this being a safe place, a wonderful place for families.
Percy's favorite expression, I'll remember it if I live to be 150, is that the only thing that's impossible is to straddle a mud hole with a one-wheel wheelbarrow. And that was his, he didn't think anything was impossible.
Well, there was nothing here, period. I mean, absolutely nothing. I recall just as a kid walking just all over what is now Satellite Beach, and it was nothing but palmetto bushes. There was no schools. There was nothing in the area.
So Daddy drove us to school for a while, and to Henninger.
I started out at what I found out last night was called Ruth Henninger, but I knew it as Melbourne Elementary School on New Haven. And then eventually, as this community developed, we did get a bus service for kids up here. And
I got bused all the way to Sherwood Elementary School over by where BCC is now.
My son, we lived at 229 Harwood, and he was 6 years old when we moved here, and we never moved, and he went to 7 different locations to school. Went to Creel Elementary.
They bussed him out there to the airport.
I went to school at Indiana Elementary.
Contractors, Surfside School, elementary school, said that we would have to send our kids off somewhere and have double session because they couldn't possibly get the school finished by the opening school day. So all of the citizens of Satellite Beach came down, and we unrolled the rugs, laid the rugs, unpacked all the furniture, and lo and behold, much to the contractor's surprise, the school opened on the first day of school.
Surfside Elementary School had just opened, and I went there the first year it opened in 3rd grade.
In '62, Satellite High opened.
But she had to go to Satellite High School for junior high.
Following year they built DeLaura. He went to DeLaura, and he said, "Thank God, when I get back to Satellite, I won't have to go to another school."
We had a great time building a library. The Women's Club decided we needed a library, and the Lions Club decided we needed a library.
And that's the year we built the library. We built it with our own crew, volunteers, and the city bought the material.
And half was the library and half the Civic Center for meetings. At any rate, we did get a library, and several of our women's club members who had worked so hard getting the library became the library board, and also Betty Demchak, who was a member of our women's club and anxious to get this library going, became our new first librarian.
And then Percy wanted a lot of donated books. He wanted to start out with 6,000 books in the new building. Well, by the time the building opened, we had 6,000 books. And this building was divided in half, and we only had half of this building as our first library. The other side was for the Scouts and the Art League, and they could leave their art materials there, and the Scouts could leave things in there. We grew very quickly. Percy and I had a couple of long talks, and I said, we've got to do something, Percy. We need that room. So he moved them out of there. And I used volunteers for everything when we first opened, because we only had a librarian and one assistant. Satellie Beach Women's Club, they stayed involved in the entire time, and they're still involved with the library.
The first civic groups formed in the community were two religious congregations. Within 8 years, the new town had grown to 6 congregations within its city limits. The Evangelical Free Church of Satellite Beach and the Holy Apostles Episcopal Church both were meeting before there was a city. Initially, the Free Church met in the founding family's garage, and the Episcopal congregation met in borrowed model homes.